Hey, hey, hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. So, it turns out that your wife wasn't just attending church. She was also attending a private sermon in the pastor's SUV. Now you've got enough evidence to make even the holiest among us break into a sweat. Today on rSpace, we're not just dealing with a cheater. We're dealing with a sermon of deceit and a sinful sugar daddy scandal. My wife's sugar daddy was a married pastor. I left her with nothing and destroyed his ministry. I, 30 male, have been married to my wife, 32 female, for 4 years now. We met at a friend's party. She came along with her friend, who was a mutual friend of the host, and I came as a friend of the host myself. When I say party, it wasn't like a rave or anything, but a regular afternoon house party with food, fun, and meat grilling outside. So nothing crazy. I've been in crappy relationships, and I always try to remain alert for obvious red flags. I know I can't see everything, but I always make sure to catch the ones that are out there. Women have burned me too many times. We talked at the party, exchanged contact information, and soon started dating. We dated for nearly 2 years before I proposed, and we got married 6 months after that. It was a regular relationship, and I was at least sure that I loved her a lot. That was all that really mattered to me, as it should be. She has always been focused on growing as an interior decorator, and as for me, I'm a real estate agent. One of the first things that I did to help her out with her business was to find a good location for her to have a physical location, which I have rented for her ever since, and she took care of the interior, making sure that people actually knew she was the kind of interior decorator that they wanted the moment that they walked in. The arrangement has remained this way, with me taking care of the rent and her taking care of the business. It's been great for her business and has grown quite a lot since then. I couldn't be happier with how things have turned out for her. We have had our normal share of issues in our marriage, but I think something that has been going on recently might be the most significant of them all, and I personally think that there's more to what's going on now than meets the eye, which is why I'm here writing out this whole thing for you all to share your thoughts with me. We live in a state that is very Christian. We both have some degree of faith. What I mean by that is that I'm a church once or twice a month kind of person, while she has usually been a church every weekend type of woman. I do think I might have had a negative influence on her though, as by the second year of our marriage, she started to go just as much as I do. Anyway, relatively recently, things have changed with her and she started to go to church a lot more than usual. In fact, it's even more than before. She goes to church or to see the pastor about 8 times a month in a total, if not more. Initially, it made sense because she was dealing with a loss of an aunt who was extremely close to her, but it continued for several months. The reason it didn't raise any red flags or set off any alarm bells was because I know what it is like to lose someone who you love a lot, and I know there's no deadline to mourning. It seemed like her faith was her crutch, and the pastor was helping her out with that. However, as much as I acknowledge that there's no deadline to mourning, it really just seemed like the entire thing went on for way too long. There was barely a sign of things tapering down to a more manageable point. In fact, there were certain points where it just started to increase. And at that same time, after some time, she stopped talking to me about her emotions regarding the loss of her aunt, and her mood seemed to be normalizing. So at that point, I really started to wonder whether there was something going on. Now, I wasn't even sure that she was going to church initially. I realized that she could be telling me that, but going somewhere else. And it was that moment that I thought that I had really started to overthink things. I finally decided that I needed to talk to her when I just happened to see her using her bank app on her smartphone, and I got a glimpse of her account balance. It was a lot higher than I'd have expected it to be, and no, it really couldn't be explained away by business being good because it was simply too much above what it usually would be, even with a good streak of business. I really didn't know what to think of that, especially because she hadn't told me about any huge contracts she had just gotten her hands on. But yeah, I brought it up with her, and I started by telling her that I saw the bank account balance, and I was wondering what was going on there. She only seemed phased for about a second, so I believed her when she said that it was an inheritance from her aunt. They were extremely close, and the aunt was rather well-to-do, so it made sense. She said she hadn't mentioned it because it hurt her a lot to talk about the material gain off of the loss of a loved one. According to her, she wasn't planning to keep it a secret. She just hadn't found the right time to talk about it. She claimed she hadn't spent a dime of it either, for the same painful reasons. I accepted what she had to say because it honestly made sense to me. I decided to use that opportunity to ask her something else though. And that's when I asked her about her going to church so much. I wanted to clue her in that I was having suspicions that she might be lying to me. but I really wasn't ready to turn things into a big fight, especially after the mood had changed with the aunt topic. So I just asked her something along the lines of, do you still feel like you need to be going to church so often still? You've been going there like 3 times a week these days. She said that she knew it was a lot, and she was going to try and go less now that she felt she had emotionally healed to some degree. But she said that the pastor was a real beacon of hope for her, and he was helping her out rather significantly with her pain. She then went on into about 3 or 4 minutes of praising the man of God and how he was such an excellent salve for the pain that she was going through. She says that he helped her reconnect with her faith, and that at least made me happy because I know how mourning can make some people stray from God. Here's the thing. Everything that she said was entirely reasonable, but there's just something about it that doesn't make me feel at ease. Saying that she got an inheritance from her aunt and telling me absolutely nothing about it makes me feel weird. Going to see her pastor so frequently also makes me feel weird, and I'm convinced that she's lying about that part. I feel like it might be more than that some of those times. She's going out, not all of them. She's going somewhere else, but it is impossible for me to tell unless I decide to follow her enough times until she slips up. Maybe that's what I'll end up doing. I hate that I'm even considering it. I'd prefer not to do it at all. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what might be happening. Am I being paranoid and insecure, or should I simply trust my wife a lot more? I'm open to hearing all angles. Edit. I acknowledge that there's suspicious behavior, but yes, I also agree with the person who says that everything I see that is off compared to her usual behavior could simply be directly linked to her mourning. It's the first major death she's ever experienced, so it is not too unusual for her to take it hard and for things to be very different after it. I can see that point of view, and I acknowledge it. Edit 2. A good point was made that it won't hurt for me to either follow her around each time she leaves for 2 weeks, or to simply check her phone. I hate to say that I agree. One of those will provide the answer for me, and I'll be sure to take the first chance that I get it either. I don't like living while feeling paranoid about somebody that I'm meant to trust, so it'll help the faster I can uncover the truth. I prefer to check her phone because I'll get the unfiltered truth there. Here's a thought. If she's been so busy finding solace in the church, perhaps the pastor's been offering more than just spiritual comfort. Maybe she's trading in divine inspiration for a bit of earthly pleasure. And if her inheritance hasn't seen the light of day, she might just be putting it in a different kind of investment, like a new relationship that's clearly not saving her soul. Update 1. Hi everyone, it's me again. I told a story about how I suspected that my church-going wife was using time with the pastor as a cover story for doing something else, which I really felt might be her cheating since nothing else seemed to make sense. I'm fortunate to have a big update regarding this, though I'm not quite sure where I'd call it good news. So, with my wife going to see the pastor about 3 times a week, I finally made a decision to trail her for about 2 weeks straight to see what was going on. Trust me, it was tough. But since I always knew where she was supposedly heading, the few occasions wherein I lost track of her made it easy to catch up. To my surprise, I discovered that she was actually going to church each of those times, but I made sure to keep trailing her, at least for those 2 weeks. I was able to find out that something was wrong though. On the final day that I was supposed to be following her, I lost track of her when I got stopped at a light, but I headed right to the church when the light turned green. I found her car parked there, and for some reason that day, I decided to stick around until she came out. I was sure that I was parked at a point where she wouldn't be able to see me. About 3 hours later, a big SUV pulled around. I knew it was our pastor's car, and then I watched as she stepped out of the car before getting into hers and driving off. That part set off alarm bells in my head because it made it very clear to me that she wasn't in the church that entire time, and she must have departed with him before I arrived in the parking lot. That was when I knew that something had to be wrong. According to her, she might wait around in the church for a bit and then go to his office to talk to him, but they never went outside the church for any reason. I eventually got back home after her and told her that I had simply gone on a ride to clear my mind. She didn't seem suspicious of anything, so I decided to see whether she'd acknowledge that something unusual had happened that day. I asked her whether her meeting with the pastor had been fine that day, and she said it had been. She didn't hint me in on anything different happening though. After that, I asked her whether anything noteworthy had happened during her day, but again, she didn't mention anything about going somewhere with the pastor. That was when I made the decision to check her smartphone as soon as I could. There was something about feeling like something was going on between her and the pastor. But honestly, I couldn't help that feeling, and I simply needed to do so to free both myself and her of the suspicion. Fortunately for me, I was able to get a good shot at her phone 2 days after that happened. She went to take a nap and she left her phone in the living room, so I went straight at it. It has a password, but I've always known it, so the first thing I did was unlock her phone and go to her messaging app. I've noticed that she's been really active on Facebook Messenger the last few weeks, so that's where I went. Lo and behold, I see our pastor's account at the very top. There was a message from him that she hadn't opened yet, but for some reason, I didn't let that stop me. I opened the conversation and scrolled through the entire thing. It had everything I was looking for, and I mean that. It started with him flirting with her, apparently after she had gone to see him one of those days. He made a few gentle passes at her, and she was receptive, so he kept going. I don't think you know what it is like to read your wife gleefully accepting another man's advances. It hurt a lot, that's for sure. After that, it took about a week before there was a mention of something that had happened that afternoon. He said that he didn't think what went down should happen again. But then my wife said that she didn't care if it did. There was nothing explicitly mentioned at that point, but I think it was very clear it was referring to sex. Scrolling through, there were a few more loose references to the fact that they had slept together, but they seemed to avoid mentioning their activities in the messages. Well, up until the point where my wife sent him a picture of herself topless, and he reacted hungrily to it. At that point, I had a presence of mind to document everything that I had seen in the chat, especially all the aspects that pointed to the infidelity. It also became clear that he had been sending her money, and that's where the money I saw on her account had come from. Apparently, he started sending her money himself, but she prompted it on a few occasions, making up excuses that were obviously false so that he'd pay up. Basically, our pastor is my wife's sugar daddy, and she seems to be enjoying it. For reference, both of these people are married, so they must both be existing under the threat of their mutually assured destruction. Now, I have just found all of this out, and I haven't acted on it yet, but it is clear that there's a divorce loading up because there's no other way that this can go. But I'm also going to make sure that I divorce her butt, expose the pastor to the congregation, his wife, and the general public, and just find all of the potential ways that I can hurt both of these people. That's what I want to do, and it is what I'm going to do. I'll be back with an update once I've figured everything out. All I ask is that you wish me luck. Well, it seems like your wife has found a new way to meet her maker, just not the one she intended. Who knew that the path to salvation included a side of financial support and some heavenly favors from the pastor? Looks like she's been getting blessed in more ways than one. Good luck with that fallout. With any luck, they'll be looking for a new congregation to bless them with their presence after this. Update 2. This is the final update, and as much as I am heartbroken with the way things have gone, at the very least, I am glad that I am here giving this update. I can't feel worse than I felt already trying to resolve the situation. It is only up from here, isn't it, fellas? So, I started to speak to a divorce lawyer, all the while that my wife was still going to see the pastor several times a week. By the time I had paid the lawyer and I was ready to serve her with the papers, she was still seeing him, though about twice a week at that point. Just so you know, I refused to sleep with her the entire time because I had no idea what she could be trying to send my way in terms of diseases. She did notice that something was off because I kept making excuses, but it seemed that her sex drive was being satiated for the most part. Anyway, one day, as soon as she came back from her visit with him, I handed her an envelope. She opened it up, and that was when she saw that I wanted to divorce her. To say that she was shocked is an understatement. We both just stood there while I waited for her to say the first thing. I really wanted her to ask why because I was about to unleash on her if she did, and just as predicted, she asked. In fact, it was the only word that she was able to croak out. I went all out on her. I called her horrible names in the process, but I felt no remorse whatsoever. I told her that I knew she was cheating on me, and as if that wasn't enough, she was cheating on me with our pastor, a man that I knew and at least respected before all of this started happening. Not only was she cheating on me, but with the pastor, a married one at that. How many lines didn't she care that she crossed? On top of that, she was getting money from him like a prostitute. She started crying at that point, which obviously wasn't surprising, and to my absolute surprise, she actually tried to explain it away. He was there for me at a time when I was weak and I couldn't find strength. It just sort of happened and I couldn't pull away. In that moment, I wanted to punch through a wall or break something, but I held my emotions in check. Honestly, I was so pissed off in that moment, that line sort of left me speechless. I told her to get out right away before I ended up hurting her, and that seemed to frighten her enough. She grabbed a few essential things and was out of the house in 10 minutes. I knew that she would probably end up in his bed at the end of the night, but at that point, I couldn't care any less than I already did. The first thing that I did the very next day was to call my pastor's wife. Her phone number wasn't hard to get from the church community. I didn't really consider whether she might be one of those people who'd prefer to be ignorant about infidelity or not. I needed to tell her the truth, and I really hoped it was about to blow things up in their marriage. After all, I didn't need an understanding wife who would forgive her husband like Jesus. It'd be more satisfying if it broke up his marriage. That's not a good look for a pastor. When I told her the news over the phone, there was silence for a long time. She sounded pretty sad, and she even said "not again" under her breath. This clearly wasn't the first time that our pastor had been playing outside of his house. She thanked me profusely for coming forward and also apologized for the way that her husband had hurt me. She said, "I can't keep doing this," before she hung up. Here's a quick spoiler. They're separated now. Whether it will last or not, I don't know. Somehow, before I even got to it, the news had leaked into the congregation, and while the pastor tried to do damage control at his next sermon, he eventually went on sabbatical. As we speak, he's still on sabbatical, which sounds to be more of a suspension of some kind. He's clearly not a good look for the ministry, though, and that makes me glad. The divorce proceedings weren't fun, as divorce proceedings never are, but I have gotten through them. I submitted all the evidence I had taken from my phone and stated my entire case. She tried to deny things, but the fact that she admitted that she was consistently going to see the pastor so frequently for so long didn't seem to endear her to the judge, especially when the news got a hold of a scandal in the church and the judge was aware of that. Everything seemed to favor my side of things. In the end, she got to keep her car and I have to pay a little alimony. Thankfully, we were yet to have children, so there was no need for a custody battle. I do hate that I have to pay her anything, though. The house is still mine, at least, and it is clear to everyone that she got the short end of the stick in the divorce, as she should. Of course, the next time that rent was due on the place she was using for her interior decor business, I didn't pay it. She could keep it if she wanted to, but she'd have to deal with that major expense herself. I also called her parents the moment things were finalized and told them all about what their daughter had been doing behind my back. Needless to say, they were appalled. They liked me a lot, and I liked them too. But hey, some things don't work out, especially with cheating partners in the mix. So that's it for me. After more than 6 years of being with this woman, it all ended because she was cheating on me. But it is for the best. I much prefer the potential of being alone and happy rather than being together with someone who doesn't value me the way they should. The alimony? It's a small price to pay for the privilege of dodging her constant, faithful promises. And as for her interior decorating business, well, looks like she'll need to redecorate her own financial mess now. In the end, it's clear you've moved on to greener pastures. And she's left to try and furnish her new, very lonely life. Here's to hoping your next chapter is free from infidelity and filled with a lot less drama. Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.